Welcome to my pile of rubble. We didn't have an earthquake. This is actually the site of the new shop. This is right next to my house, and we have a sidewalk that goes around the perimeter of the yard. So of course, the first step is to chop this beautiful sidewalk up and get it out of the way. So as you can see, these guys did some serious damage today. It actually started with knocking down the block wall so that they can get heavy machinery in here, but man, they made quite a mess. It's actually kind of cool though, because we should be putting in a 1,800 square foot shop that's going to basically be in this area back. And it's pretty intense. I mean, this is really every woodworker's dream, right? Is to be able to build your dream shop, a standalone shop. But as soon as that reality comes into the picture and you really have to think about every little detail, the whole thing, it just means there's a lot of pressure on your shoulders to make good decisions. One bit of advice, if I had to share anything at this stage of the game, is to stay flexible, build redundancy into things, and don't expect that you're going to be able to get the absolute perfect setup right off the bat. Just make sure that you give yourself the option to change your mind with certain things later. So like committing to plug locations and all that stuff, it's a lot of pressure. So we're going to head into the house and actually look at the plans. I'll show you the process that we went through to get to this stage, but this is the mess we're left with after day one.
The plans call for a very basic building at 1,800 square feet, featuring 3 large windows, a set of double doors at the entrance, a small bathroom, and a slop sink. The building will be attached to our home and will share patio space. In order to get Homeowners Association approval for this project, we needed to make sure that the building looks like it belongs here. So a significant amount of our funds will be spent on things that truly only affect the appearance of the building. A necessary evil, but it's one that we'll be thankful for years to come. The initial demolition took a few days, and most of it was done manually with a jackhammer. Bye-bye, fire pit. I will miss you. A good amount of grass had to be pulled up as well, and unfortunately, we have numerous irrigation lines that need to be rerouted. Eventually, the big toys were brought in to clear the area for the concrete slab. Within just a couple of hours, my new shop's footprint is staring back at me. The next step was to dig for the concrete footers. While the primary slab will only be about 4 inches in thickness, the footer that goes around the perimeter needs to be much deeper. And for those of you who are familiar with concrete slabs in colder climates, welcome to Arizona. We do things a little differently here. After the trenching, a number of things were done, including rerouting the irrigation system, placement of electrical conduit, and placement of the sewage lines. Rebar was added in various locations, including the deep holes for the patio support footers. Conduit was then run underground for the 5 in-floor outlets. And now we're ready for the big pour. Thanks to our insane summer heat, the concrete truck arrived at 4 a.m. They started by filling the perimeter footer and then moved on to the slab. I'm always in awe at what a good concrete team can do. They make an incredibly difficult job look easy, and I could seriously watch them do this stuff all day long. The patio footers were then poured by hand. Now, I know nothing about concrete tools and terminology, so let me narrate this thing Wood Whisperer style. After the slab sets up a bit, the one guy uses a heavy boom stick to do something. Then the other guy uses a metal dingle hopper to do something else near the edge. Later, they surface the concrete with a motorized, upside-down helicopter thing. It was pretty cool. Later that day, the concrete cutter guy stopped by to create some nice saw-cut expansion joints. For a shop, this is much nicer than having those wide, rounded expansion gaps that most of us have in our garages. Tools will roll over that with no problem at all. The next day, they completed the patio pour and made the connection to the existing patio. I had to keep the slab wet in order to help slow down the curing process, so I had a giant wet concrete slab to play with for a few days. So I did what any self-respecting 35-year-old man would do. I bought out my RC car and drove my dogs nuts. Of course, you can't do much framing without the materials, so we had lots of deliveries. The 2x6 walls were laid out and constructed on the ground first. The OSB sheathing serves double duty as it protects the new concrete from getting damaged, and later it's going to be applied to the patio roof. Once each wall was complete, it was lifted into place and secured using scrap lumber. I have to say, sometimes I felt like a real jerk being an able-bodied human being watching these guys bust their butts in 115-degree weather, but I did it all for you. By the end of the day, I had something that vaguely looked like a building in my backyard. This big old header was installed purely for resale value. Someday, if we do wind up selling this place, I want the buyer to know that they can easily convert this space into a garage. Now it's time to attach the OSB sheathing. The roof trusses were supposed to be lifted into place with a crane. Unfortunately, the crane operator was going to be extremely late, so my contractor took matters into his own hands. Watch how they manually lift the trusses into place. This is just amazing. More OSB sheathing helped stabilize the structure, and not a minute too soon because later that day we had a big desert sandstorm. Thankfully, nothing was damaged. The next order of business was the patio. The supports were secured to the concrete footers and the headers were placed on top of the supports. Of course, the real trick is making sure that the new patio ties in perfectly with the old. To make the proper connections, roof tiles from the existing roof needed to be removed while saving as many as possible. This gave the builders the access that they needed to connect and extend the patio roof. And one of the very few casualties of the build, my kitchen window. Oopsie. The shop will have its own 200 amp sub panel, as well as water and sewage. The only way to get these things to the shop is to dig trenches. Most of the digging was done manually due to the sensitive wiring in the area, and our soil happens to be extremely well compacted. But here's a good look at the conduit. One for electric, and two for any utilities and future needs. In order to accommodate the new 200 amp sub panel, our house panel needed to be upgraded to 400 amps. So here's a look at the new panel installation. The plumbing required its own trench, which had to cross the driveway and make its way to the front of the house, where it tied into the existing sewage line. Once again, care had to be taken not to disturb the landscape irrigation lines. Before I knew it, though, the final connections were complete. Most homes in Arizona have clay or concrete tile roofs, and ours is no exception. Strips are laid down to support each row of tile, and then the tiles are stacked neatly in place by a tile setting crew. And man, these guys are fast. The following day, the regular crew installed the tiles. I can think of several good reasons why I do not want that job. The exterior stucco coating starts with a layer of tar paper, followed by styrofoam sheets, which is then followed by a wire mesh. The product being used here is called Western One Coat, and despite its name, it actually goes on in 2 coats. The material was mixed on site and immediately applied to the building as a scratch coat. After a couple of days of cure time, they came back to do the finish coat. Now obviously, it's incredibly important that the finish coat match the house exactly. Of course, a couple of coats of paint makes things look nice and pretty. The rest of the project was something of a whirlwind. Here's the electrical, plumbing, and AC rough-in. Before I knew it, the shop had windows and doors. The insulation guys were in and out in a day, putting R19 in the walls and R36 in the ceiling. Of course, the next thing is everyone's favorite, drywall. I was in awe of this sweet vehicle that I like to call the drywall picker-upper-dropper-offer. If you have the means, I highly recommend picking one up. They're so choice. The drywall crew worked at a blazingly fast speed. This guy was driving screws at a rate of about 1 screw per second. The tape and mud work was done over the course of several evenings. And now you know why a pair of stilts was added to my Christmas list. The drywall received a knockdown texture to match what we have in the house. While I can understand why some folks don't like textured walls, they really do make repairs a breeze. As you can see, I was also looking at some paint colors at this point. And speaking of paint, here's the paint crew working on the ceiling. Nice respirator. With the vast majority of the interior work done, it was time to focus on the floor. I decided to go with a durable epoxy coating. When it comes to epoxy, preparation is everything. Usually they do an acid etch, but because we have no drainage, they had to employ a diamond grinding technique. Using these massive grinders, they abrade the top surface of the new concrete, giving it a strong mechanical tooth for the epoxy to bind to. Thankfully, they brought their own dust collection. You can see they use a small handheld unit to get into the tighter spaces. Now I tried to get some footage of the epoxy application, but the odor was absolutely unbearable, so here's a shot of the first coat drying a few hours later. On day 2, they apply a clear protective coat while embedding a fine non-slip grit and some decorative flakes. And here's the final result. It's easy to clean, it's nice and bright, it's super durable, and it's non-slip. After the floor was done, the electricians came back to finish up the lighting and the floor outlets. And the very last thing to be done was the remaining patio pour. Although it wasn't part of the original plan, we decided to extend the patio to the entire front area of the shop. This is going to be a great place for me to store my cargo trailer.
Now I'm going to fast forward and show you what the shop looks like a couple of weeks later. The tool move was pretty uneventful, and I did document a tool move in the past. It's pretty much the same thing, except for this time we didn't almost tip over the table saw, so it actually was a little bit better than past experiences. But really, it was fairly easy just to move the tools into the various positions, and I had a pretty good idea where I wanted things to go. Kind of work that stuff out ahead of time. But what I want to do now is show you some of the details, give you a little justification behind some of the things that I did, things that I couldn't do while the build was in progress. So let's go take a look. Of course, power is a huge concern for any workshop. So the shop has its own 200 amp sub panel. We ran about 11 220 outlets, and I think it was the final total was about 18
110 outlets, all 20 amp on the 110, and I have a mix of 20 and 30 amp circuits for the 220. But you can see this is a typical layout. Every place I had power, I kind of wanted to cluster things together because you just never really know whether you're going to have a 110 tool or a 220 tool there in the future. So I've got a nice 220 generator receptacle here, and then I have the standard 110. Right? And this is throughout the shop. I had a basic idea where I wanted things, but I wanted to build in redundancy. Because the truth is, until you're in that workspace, you don't really know exactly where things are going to go. So if there's no flexibility and you just based everything off of some theoretical design, you're going to land yourself in hot water. So lots of redundancy built in. Another thing that I did was I installed ceiling outlets and floor outlets. Now this allows me to do a number of things. First of all, I no longer have to run a cord to the wall if a tool is in the middle of the room. It could just basically go into the power outlet right in the floor, which is a really nice treat. The other thing is on the ceilings, if you have extension cords, like I've got the robo reel set up over here, you may have an air filter that you want to plug into the ceiling. Those things are nice to have ceiling outlets for. So definitely plenty of power in this shop. I've got no complaints about that. And I almost forgot about this guy. I included a 110 power outlet here in the floor because my Festool setup typically is in the center of the room. So whenever I run power to one of my CT vacs, I always have to run a power cord to the wall. So this is really nice to have everything self-contained and no wires to trip over. Now, of course, living in the desert, it gets darn hot here. And I'm a bit of a wimp when it comes to 120 Fahrenheit days. So to do what I do for a living, I got to be in this shop every day. I need something to cool this place down. So what you see behind me on the wall is a Mitsubishi ductless mini split. Now, as I was talking about this stuff on the website during the build and blogging about it, I got a lot of questions about that, and I just thought I would share with you some of my reasons for doing this type of a system as opposed to a standard ducted HVAC system. Really two primary reasons. Number one is efficiency. These units are just incredibly efficient. They don't cost nearly as much to run, and it makes me feel a lot less guilty about cooling this place down in the middle of the summer. The other thing is they are exceptionally quiet. Just the noise in my house from a regular HVAC system would be way too loud for me to film with. That sort of background hiss would just create this horrible sound in a video that you guys would probably not enjoy very much. So with these units running on low, I should have no problem keeping the place cool and also keeping it so that the video has really no idea that there's any noise in the background. The only drawback to this unit is the fact that it is on the wall. It takes up wall space. But with a shop of this size, it's something that I think I could work around without much of a problem. So I've got 3 of these interior units, 2 exterior units. So the 2 at the front I could turn on separately from the one in the back. So if I feel like these 2 can handle it by itself, or maybe I'm not working on the back end of the shop, I could just put these 2 on, and if I'm comfortable, then I don't have to run as much electricity and I could save a few bucks. But ultimately, very happy with the choice on these. I've used these in the past in the other small garage there, and it worked really well there. And I have to give a little bit of a shout out to my buddy Vic Hubbard, who throughout this whole process, and even before when I made the decision on the other unit, was always there to give me guidance in making good decisions about the air conditioning unit. So thanks, Vic. I always appreciate that. Let's move on to the lighting. Now, I've turned the lights off so you could actually see what I'm talking about here. We've got a series of fixtures that go down the shop. They're 8 foot in length, and the fixture itself is broken up into 2 sections. So we have 4 bulbs in each fixture. Each bulb is 4 foot long. They are T8 bulbs. The spectrum of light is 6500K. That's a little bit bright for some people. Not everybody likes that. Some people want to be down near 5 instead of all the way up at 6500, but that works for me for a number of reasons, and I'll get into some of that later. But the spread is pretty even across the shop. There is one problem that I noticed though. After this was installed, it was something I couldn't have really predicted until I was in the shop, and that is the very, very back. It's a little bit dark back there, so I think what we need is another row. I just didn't notice when I looked at the plans that there was actually room for another row of lights if we wanted to put them there. So thankfully, that's something that's pretty easy to extend the circuit and put 2 more fixtures back there. But overall, if you're going for shop lighting, I think T8s are a must. The other thing is the light spectrum. I mentioned that before. 6500K is great for me. I think that's what I really like to film in. And part of the decision that I made with the lighting is concerning the filming because it's such an important thing for what I do. So that's another concern.
as it pertains to the windows. That's something I got a lot of questions about too, so let's take a look at those. One of the most common pieces of feedback that I received about the shop was, hey, where's all the windows? And I really only have 3 windows. You see one here, one over there, and there's one over on the other side. And of course, my double doors in the front have 2 big windows in the doors themselves. The thing is, I've actually set this shot up intentionally so you could see exactly why I can't have big bright windows in my shop. What happens is the automatic iris adjustment on the camera it's affected by all this bright light over here and the bright light over there, and just dims the rest of the picture. Now, of course, I could put it on a manual mode, but the problem is when there's too much bright light in a picture and it's not dispersed over the entire image, you wind up with issues like this. And it just makes my work a lot harder when I'm trying to film something. So that's the reason why I don't have many windows, because all of those windows need to receive some sort of a window covering. I need to black them out when I film. So the only light that you're going to see coming into the shop is from the lights in the ceiling. Now, as much as I love to have a ton of windows, just because that makes for a great woodworking shop, it doesn't make for a great filming environment. So unfortunately, I went with 3. That was even more than I was really originally planning on doing, but I couldn't resist putting one over on the other side. But overall, when I'm ready to woodwork without the camera on, I've got plenty of natural light. And then for the filming, which really is the most important part of what I do, I've got the right setup for it. Obviously, I still need window coverings, but that's the explanation for why I don't have that many windows here. Now, the final thing I wanted to show you real quick is the slop sink and, of course, the bathroom. Now, no real need to show you the bathroom. It's just a toilet and a sink. And then, of course, this is just something that it's a real nice privilege to have in the shop. I've never really had plumbing. I've never had a place to wash my hands or to dilute a water-based finish or something like that. For me, I have this problem with distraction. And I've worked from home or near home enough to know that if I can go into the house for something, if I have some little excuse, I will go in there and I will probably kill 30 or 40 minutes doing something stupid instead of working throughout the day. So knowing that about myself, I knew that having a bathroom in here and making sure that I was completely self-sufficient was absolutely necessary for me to get a lot of work done during the day, despite the fact that my back door is about 20 or 30 feet away. So it's a little mind game that I play with myself. It's certainly nice to have in a shop, but for me, it was a must-have. I just need to remove all possible reasons to go into the house during the day to bother Nicole, although I'll probably still come up with a few good excuses, but at least I'm trying.
The project began on July 2nd and was completed by September 25th. Estimated time frame given by the contractor was 60 working days. Actual total, 62 working days. And that's not too bad considering we had a number of changes and delays due to things out of our control. The contractor we used was Rounds Construction, and I highly recommend them if you happen to be in the Phoenix area. Check them out at roundsconstruction.com.
So there it is, folks. That's the dream shop build. It seemed like it took forever, but when you look at the calendar, it really was a short amount of time. These guys just came in here and knocked this project out in a very, very short period of time. Now, if you look around, things clearly aren't done yet. I've still got a lot of tools set up to do. I've got the dust collection system to finish up, and you can see back over my shoulder here, the Clearview system is up and ready to go. I just need to install all of the ductwork. Believe it or not, I'm waiting on one little clamp before I can do that. And as soon as that comes in, I'll proceed with the ductwork installation. But there's a lot of little things here. You know, we're gonna have some storage projects coming up pretty soon. Anything I think that you guys would be interested in as I move forward, if it pertains to the shop build, I'm gonna show you all that stuff. But I gotta say, you know, aside from the obvious reasons of why building a dream shop is just awesome, it's every woodworker's dream, I think this is really, really good for the show. I think having more room to work, more room to stage better video shots for you guys, and it's just incredibly inspirational for me. I just have a renewed energy to go back in and show you guys everything that I'm working on, whether it's on the free site or in the guild. So lots of great things to come. I'm really, really excited about it, and just want to thank you guys for being here with me through all of my shop changes over the years. It's not really so much a undecided sort of finicky thing that I've been switching shops back and forth. Unfortunately, it was by necessity. And finally, I feel like we have our home. We have a place where that we can call home and just continue to build the future of the business from this location. So I hope you guys will continue with me on this journey. Some great things to come. And of course, thanks for watching.